Hi everyone, welcome to Entre-Elles. I'm your host, Tombeni Kouloufoua, and this podcast is a platform for women of the world to tell their professional success stories. Twice a month, I interview a woman who shares her professional journey and her personal goals. Whether she lives in Abidjan, Accra, London, Paris, or San Francisco, her human experience is universal. In this podcast, you'll hear about ambition, perseverance, hard work, dedication, challenges, but also soul-searching and purpose. Today, Entre-Elles invites you to travel to Japan to meet a force of nature. Kaoruko Magnier-Watanabe grew up between Japan and the United States and is the CEO of Watanabe Academy in Tokyo, an education consulting firm that was originally founded by her mother in 1984. In this episode, we talked about identity, working with family, the evolving place of women in Japanese society, education, of course, and Kaoruko's global vision for the Watanabe Academy. Here is our conversation, recorded remotely between London and Boston, where Kaoruko was on a business trip. Hi, Kaoruko.
Hi, Tombani. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak with you.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me today for this new episode of Entre-Elles. I always wanted to have you on, so I'm very excited about our conversation. Let's start with your early years. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I was born in the south of Japan. When my parents got married, they were living near Tokyo. But in Japan, it's a tradition for mothers to give birth near their mothers. So my grandmother was living in the south of Japan, Kyushu, Fukuoka. So basically, I grew up in Tokyo until two years old, but I was born in a small city called Kurume in the south of Japan.
And you moved to the US at the age of 2 to Santa Monica in sunny California?
Yes. I was thinking about my childhood since you've given me this opportunity, and it's been interesting to go through what my childhood basically. And my parents, they grew up very traditionally in Japan. My father is born in 1939. My mother is born in 1945. So right where World War II was happening. And, I think for them going to the United States in 1973, I guess, was a big thing because it had only been 27 years after the end of World War II. So I remember my parents being very, very nervous about going abroad at that time. Japan still had that stigma about World War II. There were a lot of World War II veterans in the United States. So it must have been extremely stressful to move. But yes, I moved to Santa Monica, California when I was 2.5 years old. My father worked for a big Japanese conglomerate. And during the 70s, it was a big thing for Japanese companies to set up shop in the United States to expand their businesses. And my father was one of those pioneers that started the Japanese division, I guess, in the United States. So yeah, I moved when I was 2.5 years old with my parents and as an only child. Yeah. I also wanted to mention that, my parents weren't extremely conventional. They were brought up very traditionally. In Japan, it's a big thing. It's not really a caste, but where your parents or your ancestors come from. And on my father's side, it's the samurai class, the warrior class. And from my mother's side, they were, I guess my great-grandfather would have been the 7th generation doctors. So both of my parents came from very traditional backgrounds, but they both converted to Christianity when they graduated from university. My parents went to a Baptist college in the south of Japan, where I was born. So I think they were really, really excited about going to the United States, but at the same time, they thought about it as a permanent thing. They were just representing their country, their companies. So it was a move, but it wasn't to immigrate or anything. We were just an expat, we were supposed to be there for a couple of years. So maybe that experience might not be something that's generalizable because we always knew that we were Japanese. Our identity was always Japanese. So I remember my parents telling me, okay, next year we're going to go back to Japan. The next year we're going to go back to Japan. So in a way, I've always thought of myself as half American, half Japanese, but without having the passport of the United States, I guess.
At the age of 12, you moved back to Japan. What was that experience like, having spent your formative years in California, but moving back to your home country as a preteen?
Well, as I said, every year, when I was 3.5 years old, my mom would tell me, oh, we're going to go back to Japan next year. And when I'm 4 years old, my parents kept on telling me we were going to move next year. And that went on for 10 years. So I thought, okay, yeah, right. Next year we're going to really go back to Japan. And I really didn't believe that. And by that time, my Japanese was kind of shaky. It wasn't, I had never been formally going to Japanese school, just speaking at home in Japanese. So I knew that, okay, my Japanese is not going to be at par. It wasn't going to be academically on par. And of course, I never believed that we would be going back to Japan. So during the time, when up until 12 years old, I thought of myself as being American. I went to American school. I always loved to get good grades. I was always top of my class, the teacher's pet. I really enjoyed my life in California, especially the weather. And then one day, we get on a plane, not knowing that was the plane that was going to take me back to Japan. I always thought I was going to go back. But one day, my parents told me, okay, we're going to get on a plane. And boom, I was in Japan. I remember, because it's sunny California, I was in short pants and t-shirt. And actually, it was in February. And the weather in Japan, in Tokyo, in February is just like where you are in Tobani. It's extremely cold. I remember it was snowing, but I hadn't even owned a coat at that point because sunny California, the temperature never goes down below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And I really thought, okay, what's going on? Where's my return ticket? Why is it so cold here? And what am I doing here? So it was just a shock by the fact that all of a sudden I wasn't living in the United States anymore. I was living in Japan, which at that time, I was going back to Japan during my summer vacations, maybe every 3-4 years. So for me, Japan meant summer. It also meant, vacation. It also meant cute stationery and, Hello Kitty and all those cute stuff. So everything was originally associated with happiness and freedom and summer and eating what I want and sleeping late. It was all that rosy thing. But when I went back to Japan unknowingly at the age of 12, it was February, it was snowing. My parents had rented a house in Tokyo, which was a far cry from where we lived in California. Because in California, in Santa Monica, you can go to the beach, you can go outside. I had my own room. And, everything was great. And all of a sudden we were in this small house, really old. I don't know. I mean, it was just a really depressing situation at that time, during that first few weeks after arriving in Japan. And somehow or another, I had taken an entrance exam, I guess, to a junior high school, and apparently I was accepted. So all that was done without my noticing that I was actually moving back to Japan. But I went back to Japan in February and started first year of junior high in April. Actually, the school that accepted me was a school that was experimenting with kids who were returning from abroad, actually, to figure out how to integrate them back into Japanese society. So I was part of a big experiment by the national schools and the education ministry and Ministry of Education. So I guess this is why I was accepted into that school. But because you're kind of the experiment, that rat in their experiment, again, we were treated well. One of my best friends from even today are from the classmates that I met during that first few years in Japan. I had friends who came back from Madagascar, France, Belgium, England, the United States, South Africa, Ivory Coast. There were, kids like me, but we were seen as those rats in the experiment, going around in our little cage. And I never felt really welcomed in that sense, because in Japan, it's a collective society, and anything that's different is considered not them. So I don't know, there was that culture shock, but at the same time, when I think about it today, my childhood in the United States was kind of like that as well. I never was really integrated into society because I was Japanese. I never thought that my parents kept on telling me, okay, we're going to go back to Japan this year, next year, next year, next year. So I never really thought of myself really settled into society, although I thought of myself as being half Japanese, half American. But I think my childhood consists of these times and questions of who I am, who am I? What is my identity? What nationality am I? Am I so different? Why am I so different? How can it be like other people? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a typical growth adolescent question, but I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say that I had a horrible childhood, but I know it was mired with a lot of challenges about my identity and who I am.
And that came quite early, because usually, as you say, it comes later, sometimes later in life, right?
Yeah. And I think it's a building block for myself today, but I guess it emphasizes how important it is for you to find who you are in society, I guess. As women, we always have to realize that, yeah, we're women. Of course, we're not men, but that's the first thing, people realize, okay, you're a woman. So that in itself kind of defines who you are in society, regardless of whether or not you have to follow it or not. But it defines, okay, who you are, how you are supposed to act in society, what your obligations are, maybe, depending on culture. And for me, yes, I was a woman, but in the United States, when Japan was still considered not really an enemy for World War II, but, there was still that tension. Being Asian in a non-Asian, more European society in the United States, I was always the one who was not quite part of the group. Maybe it made me try harder and do well in school and prove myself, maybe. But I was always trying to prove myself. Okay, here I am. I might look different from you guys, but I'm here. I got good grades. My teacher loves me. Maybe I overcompensated in that sense to ground myself and find who I really am. That in itself, I had to define myself. It's very important to find out who you are, especially if you don't come from a conventional background, I think. And during the childhood in the United States, which it was extremely very satisfying and I learned a lot. It was a great experience. It helped me definitely to create who I am. And thank goodness for the grades that I was getting. I did find self-confidence. It was just that I didn't know who I was. And going back to Japan confounded that, because although I had a Japanese passport, I spoke Japanese. I was told I wasn't Japanese by people because I had lived abroad. So at 12 years old, yeah, that was a big cultural wave of negativity that came my way. But I was grateful for the school and the ministry that they were trying to figure out what to do with these kids who've lived more than 10 years abroad to find out how to integrate them into society, in Japanese society. And So I stayed in Japan for junior high and a little bit of high school, first year of high school, but my father was transferred back to the United States after that. So at that time, my mother had started her business already in Japan. So we were supposed to all go back to the United States, but I volunteered to go with my father back to the United States. And so cumulatively, I only stayed for about 4 years. So until about 15 and a half years old in Japan. So that was my experience in Japan, which has, I don't know, it has really made me into a very strong person, very determined person. Sometimes my husband says I'm extremely not flexible because I know what I want, I know what I need to do and how to get there. But I guess you are a product of your experiences in many ways. So if people are not very confident in who you are, I guess you have to make sure that they understand who you are in the essence of not by nationality or gender, but by your values, your ambitions, your ideas, and your passion, I guess. And for me, even today, that comes up front. I'm not Japanese. I'm not a woman. I'm not a mother. I'm not a wife. I am a person who wants to achieve this. I'm a person who wants to do this, or I'm a person who needs to do this, or, it's the essence. I tried to make sure that people understand what my essence is before people try to determine who I am as a nationality or my upbringing, I guess.
When that news came that you had the opportunity to go back to the US, were you happy to go back, or had you by that time already settled into your Japanese life?
Exactly. So that's a very good question, actually. After 3 years, 4 years, trying to establish your identity, trying to establish your credentials, and, trying your best to have people understand you. When I went back to Japan, of course, I did not do well. I was top student in the United States. I prided myself on that. I worked hard to do well in school. And then I went back to Japan, which was only Japanese. Everything was done in Japanese. And of course, if anybody has studied Japanese, it's a completely different language than English. The characters are different. It's not in ABCs, but it's in Chinese characters. It's just a whole different set of languages and linguistics that is so different. And of course, when I started that school in Japan, a national school, I remember my first grade was like 2 out of 100. I had never seen something like that. And, I would study, but not even studying would not really increase my grade. So I went to secondary schools, which are called jukus, or in Japan, which is very common for people to go after school. But I went to juku to make sure that I would be able to progress. And I worked hard. And by the third year, by the time I graduated from junior high school, I was at last on top of my class. So after working so hard for 3 years, and then my parents telling me, okay, by the way, maybe you should go back to the United States. It's time to go back for you. It should have been a blessing in the sense, it should have been a relief because, English, I was very confident about. I get to go back to that freedom in the United States. It should have been a welcome suggestion, but it was a tough decision to make because I thought at last I was proving myself in Japan. But according to my mother, I don't remember it, but during the summer, I enrolled in a program in the United States, in California, where it was a writing program, and apparently I had written a paper, and my mother read it, and she was just impressed about how well written it was. I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but Actually, my mother, she went to university, as I told you, in the southern part of Japan, and she was an English literature major. And she loved English from the beginning. So, she wrote English. She was very much attracted to the English language. But when she read my essay, which I don't remember exactly what it was about, but when she read it, she knew that my abilities of writing could not be nurtured in Japan any further, and it would have been a waste of my abilities if I had stayed in Japan, which is awful because I had worked so hard to improve my Japanese. But my mother thought that, my goodness, if this is the quality of her writing, then it should be, my education should continue in the United States. So, and I was doing extremely well because by the first year of high school, you're tested and tested and tested to see which way you're going to go for university in Japan. And because of my high English abilities, I was scoring so high compared to my mathematics or my other subjects. And I was just so proud about the fact that I was doing so well. But my mother thought that, that's the end. There isn't any further nurturing of my writing skills. So this is one of the reasons she gave me to follow my father to the United States instead of staying in Japan, which probably was correct, making that decision to go to the United States. Plus, it wasn't going to be back in California, but my father's company had transferred their office to Atlanta. So it was a new part of the world again that was never explored myself as well. So I was extremely curious about exploring another part of the world at the same time. So lots of conflicts, lots of stress, lots of discussions about what to do. But at the end, I did choose to go to the United States, which was odd because my father was at that time the CEO of the company here in the United States. I was going to the United States as the so-called CEO's wife, which I was only 16 years old. So I had a lot of responsibilities once I got to Atlanta, basically. So I was a high school student and the companion of a CEO in the United States. So that was really interesting. So I had to go to parties, all dressed up. I had to cook dinners and do dinner parties at home, which I didn't know how to cook. So I burned several chickens and tried to cook as well as possible. But it was a responsibility that I hadn't expected. But again, I mean, each experience could be a negative, but it's always a positive as well. And I try to focus on what positives can be made of it later on after the experience of horrific stress. But everybody has negative experiences, but I guess you cannot be mired in that. And by experience of moving back to the United States, of course, was the right choice, but it followed a lot of, stress, conflict. And the biggest thing is actually realizing that my English skills hadn't improved during the 4 years that I was in Japan. So I had a lot of catching up to do once I was back in Atlanta as well.
So your mom chose to stay in Japan, right? That's why you were saying that you had to sort of step into that role of what you called CEO's wife, but you were sort of covering for your mom during that time, right?
I had to put on dresses and everything.
So you mentioned that your mom launched her business during those years, which we'll talk about soon in our conversation, the Watanabe Academy. We'll refer to it as the family business since that's what it has grown into. First of all, can you define what that business is before we talk more about your role and how it inserted itself into your life?
Well, it's a company called Watanabe Academy, and it's headquartered in Tokyo. as I said, in Japan, people go to secondary schools after school. Education is extremely important in Japan or in any society. But again, it's extremely highly competitive as well to get into the good schools and to get into a good company. There's always that competition. So many families decide that maybe school is not enough and a secondary support is needed for their children to succeed. I utilized that service when I was trying to catch up when I first went back to Japan. And it helped immensely because it's based on tailor-made curriculums. Watanabe Academy is also one of those secondary schools that students go to after their normal school. So, but it specializes in English education. And it's been in business since 1984. So it's considered one of the oldest institutions of English education in Tokyo, or the upper half of Tokyo, meaning it's not in downtown, but it's in uptown Tokyo. And I guess at this point, it's fairly well known. But yes, that's the school that my parents started. Yes, my father was also involved in it, but it was more my mother taking charge, doing the daily business of educating Japanese students in Tokyo in English.
So after going back to the US, you graduated from high school in Atlanta. You went to college and graduated with a BA in psychology. You followed up with an MBA at Georgia Tech.
Yes.
And you are currently enrolled at Harvard for a Master in Educational Psychology.
Yes. Yeah.
Being the eldest to three sisters, was it always clear that you would be the one taking over the family business?
Well, so I said that the company or the school itself was started in 1984. And in 1984, I had lived in Japan for 2 years, I guess, my second year. By that time, I was also helping my mom. So basically, my mom's first students were my classmates at school. And actually, I was there from the beginning in that sense, not as an adult, not a full-time contribution, but as a part-time contribution, I was there from ground zero in that sense. And my mother had outsourced me at the age of 13, 14 to go tutor kids at their home in English. So I was really part of the business from the beginning. And I think that in Japan or in any countries, I guess it's normal to try to involve your family in any kind of endeavor. And my mother was quite that way. I think it also comes from her upbringing of, doctors, where they used to do is at their homes, half of the house was a hospital and half of the the building was their residence. So my mother grew up in a family where there was constant movement of nurses and patients and doctors going in and out, and everybody was helping when they could. So my mother's expectations, I guess, or her image of business or profession was involving the family. So yeah, I was involved from the beginning. And as the oldest, I guess my other sisters were also involved in their own way, but because I was the eldest, I was first in line to help. Also, there was a little bit of a I don't know, understanding that one of, well, as you said, I have two younger sisters, so we're three sisters. One of the sisters had to become a doctor, a medical doctor, to kind of to continue the lineage of medical doctors. I didn't really want to become a doctor, and neither did my youngest sister, Takako. So the middle sister, Kana, she was always quiet and studious, and She was the type of sister who would take apart all the dolls since she was little. She would pull all the hairs and all the heads and the tail, the legs and everything, and then cut them open. That was my sister, who became the doctor. She took on the responsibility of becoming the doctor. So it was up to myself and my youngest sister to decide how we wanted to become involved in the company that my parents started. I think in my parents' mind, because I am the first child to become involved in the company, that it would be myself to take over the company. Of course, I'm 8 years older than my youngest sister, so I do have more experience. I don't know if it's worldly experience, but I do have experience. So I think my parents see as me taking over the company. But to tell you the truth, I don't see myself being the sole leader or the sole inheritor of the company. I haven't told my sister yet, but I would like for us to co-own, co-direct, inherit the company together, actually. So maybe it's a little different from what my parents are thinking about. But for me, I think my sister has put in long hours as well. We're two very, very different people, which is always good because my weaknesses are her strengths and her weaknesses are kind of my strengths. So I think we accommodate each other very well. Plus, she's extremely well educated in the sense that she has a master's. She went to Tokyo University. She has a master's in sustainability, I think. She's an engineer. I'm a more liberal arts person. So we do complement each other in many, many different ways. Also, as I had told you, I moved back to Atlanta with my father to be that CEO, 16-year-old CEO's accompaniment. But after a few years, my sister, Takako, moved to Atlanta. She went up to 6th grade in elementary school in Tokyo, but she decided to attend school in Atlanta. So I actually became a mother, CEO, and a CEO, CEO's wife at the same time. But I took care of my sister. I basically brought her up from the age of 12. And at one point, because my father retired and had to go back to Japan for a couple of years, I think during my sister's junior and senior year, it was just the two of us living in Atlanta. So I was literally taking care of her. I was even going to PTA meetings in between my classes at the university to take care of my sister. So we've had a long relationship, more than sister relationship, and there's an unspoken trust between us that we're always looking out for each other, that I will not do harm, I will not put my sister in harm or any jeopardy. And I think it goes back to myself, to myself as well. I think she has a lot of trust in me. And in that trust, I know that we will always talk openly about anything and everything. So in a way, we're kind of in a symbiotic relationship where I think we can do so much in the next generation of the company. I'm not quite sure if it's a saying in any country, but in Japan, we say that companies, they kind of disappear in 3 generations. I know there is a saying called short sleeves to short sleeves in 3 generations. So my sister and I would be the 2nd generation. Hopefully our children will not do any harm to our company because they will be the 3rd generation. But I think we have a very similar vision about the company. And I think with the education and background and experience that we both have, we could do something great, I think, for the company and make sure that the efforts that my mother and father put into the company comes to fruition.
Something I find very interesting in your journey, and obviously that was made clear by what you just said, is that you went from graduating from college to working for the family business. You started leading the business, even though your mother was still very much active in the business at that time and was the founder. I remember when we discussed this offline, I jokingly asked what it was like working with family because, as I said, I would hate working daily with my family. I love them. I love you guys. But I just couldn't do that. Obviously, we talked about your relationship with your sister. So it's clear that there's a lot of love and respect there and that you found a way to interact in a productive manner together. But I don't know, what is it like working with family? Because that's all you've known, really.
Extremely challenging. And as I told you, I have had to struggle with my identity in the sense living in the United States or going back to Japan and not being accepted for being Japanese, but a little bit different Japanese. Working in a family business is another blow to your self-concept, your self-identity. And I say this with the most positive and the greatest respect to my parents because they've done so much. And I know I've been blessed and I'm extremely fortunate in my situation. But my goodness, it's extremely difficult. As I had mentioned, my parents expect me, as well as my sister, to take on the business that they started. But I also wanted to do something else as well. I've never told my parents that, but I wanted to become a pilot, and I also wanted to become actually a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and wanted to be this, and I wanted to be that. And when you were little, people ask you, okay, what do you want to become? And I had all these dreams, and all of a sudden, just because my parents opened up a business, started their own business, the expectation to continue that endeavor was all of a sudden just dropped on you. So again, who am I? What am I supposed to do with my life? I had my own ambitions. I wanted to do this. I have my own opinions. And, you try to kind of struggle to find out who you are because the founder of the company is telling you, you have to be like this or you have to act like this. When actually they're just thinking about the business and not about you, or it felt like that at that time. So taking over my parents' business did not come automatically, for sure. Also, yes, I am a daughter. I am part of the business. But when you talk to the founder of the company, which are my parents, am I talking to my parents or am I talking to the CEO of the company? It's just extremely your identity and who you're speaking with, the identity of your parents really, really gets confounded, and it's a little confusing in the sense. I've had many arguments with my mother about this, and today I'm a lot more confident about who I am, but it's an identity that your parents created, and it's nerve-wracking to see if you can fit in the shoes of what's been created for you. It's really nerve-wracking because you think that you don't have the qualifications to do that, regardless of getting an MBA or anything else. But it's in you. You are in the identity of what the founder created. So that in itself is a very difficult proposition to be working with your family, because the expectations are so much more than just being a part of a family. And there isn't that barrier or that demarcation in the way of, okay, am I right now eating dinner with the CEO or I'm having a dinner with my mom? And what can I say and what can I not say? And I think it's very confusing for my mother as well. She doesn't know if she can speak as a mother or as a CEO, because as all family businesses go, the business is always on people's minds. So even a family dinner turns into a meeting or a board meeting. So I think it's extremely, extremely challenging, but actually the rewards are immense as well. You work with people you trust immensely. For example, when I had my children, I know in a traditional sense, I would have had to take so many days off before the birth and so many days off after the birth. But since my mother gave birth to 3 children, and at that time she was not working, she was a full-time mom. She understood the challenges of having children. So I was able to take off work for 6, 7 years of doing just working part-time when I can. Of course, I was involved in more managerial decisions and decisions about the company itself. But on a daily basis, I didn't have to go to work. I was at home taking care of my kids. So I guess I'm extremely blessed in that sense. But it would only be possible if you were in a family business where we have each other's back. If you have the chance, if anybody has the chance to work with their family, I mean, I'm in complete support of that, because blood is pretty thick. You know, you don't want any illness or negativity for your blood in that sense. So, Tombani, if you have a chance to work with your family,
yeah, we'll see about that. Let's talk a bit more about the academy. So, how many employees do you have now? Because as you said, you are one of the oldest institutions of that type in Tokyo, and I guess in Japan. What does that look like in numbers?
Well, our company is extremely conservative. We have 12 full-time and then many part-time teachers. And, you know, education is not about efficiency. It's not about, well, it's about the bottom line, of course, because you want the company to be healthy. But education is not supposed to be an institution where money comes first, or it shouldn't look like that, because you're dealing with educating a child, or, you know, you have to take your time. You're dealing with people. You're dealing with families. You're dealing with grandparents. You know, one student that comes to our school is supported by at least their parents, their grandparents, and whoever is involved in the extended family to bring up that child. And we are kind of a participant of that child's education. So, of course, in our industry, there are schools, my goodness, that are build big buildings and hiring many, many teachers and trying new things. And I think that in itself is a great business model. But when parents think that your child is being educated in a system where they want to make money, I think it becomes a conflict of interest. So we're extremely careful in our company to make sure that, of course, we have to stay afloat. The bottom line is very important to be able to pay our employees generously, to be able to give them fair share of profits, I guess, is extremely important. But we make sure that we're not glitzy. We're not using the tuition that we get to build beautiful buildings, because that money should be reinvested into the education of their children or the education of the teachers. And so in that sense, I guess we're an extremely conservative company. Plus, there's another side. Well, we don't actively say we only hire women, but we try to hire women as our full-time employees. We've had men also as full-time employees as well, but the organization is extremely focused on advancing the interests of women. So in that sense, we are very conscious of the life cycle of women as well. I think it's extremely important, as my parents told me, to marry, have children if they would like to or they can, and continue the circle of life. And we make sure that we give that opportunity to our employees as well, if they need to take off time to take care of their ailing parents. That's why they turn into part-time workers a lot of times. But so we are very conscious of advocating for women to be able to take pride in being women. We are not men. We are built differently. Our genetics are different. We are we give birth to the next generation. So I think as a corporation and as an organization, we try to support women and be flexible to accommodate their life cycle and their life responsibilities at home as well. Because now in Japan, I think 45% of students who advance to higher education are women. My generation was more women did go on to higher education, but it would be for 2-year college, 2-year degree would be more of the main. But now there's no question that women would go to a 4-year institution or even more to go to graduate school or even beyond. And I think that now truly women in Japan are able to pursue their ambitions. But again, Japan is an old country as well. So there's still that stigma of women being in the kitchen, supporting their husbands. So even if there are women who have ambitions, it's very difficult in traditional companies to realize that dream. So in a small way still, our company, Watanabe Academy, is doing its best to support women and to support their ambitions as well.
When we talked about taking over this business from its founders, your parents, you told me that one thing that you brought was global exposure to the company. And so I have 2 questions. One, was that part of your growth strategy from the start when you took over? And 2, what does that mean in terms of your vision for the company?
Another great question. Yes, definitely. We're in the business of English, and English is the global language. It's the global. It's the string and it's the language that connects us globally. And since we're in the business of English, global exposure is extremely important, actually necessary. In order for our institution in Japan to even stay alive for the 3rd generation, for sure, our eyes need to be constantly outside of Japan in order to emphasize the importance of English. So global exposure, global perspective is extremely important. Maybe this is why I married a Frenchman. Maybe. I don't know. But it was the uncharted territory of the Francophone. Which is interesting when I told my mom that, by the way, I think I'm going to want to get married to this guy. And I told my mother, it's going to be great for Academy if I marry this guy. Until then, Europe was, I had gone with my father to Paris on our first visit and when we lived in Atlanta. Europe was part of our vacation spot, but never part of our business or our concept of business. So I think we're constantly trying to, again, innovate our program to be more comprehensive globally. And part of the business in the United States is exactly that, because we are an education consultant. We consult students in Japan. They don't necessarily have to be our student at the school, but we introduce the students to schools and opportunities abroad. This year, I've have students who have been accepted into universities in France and Switzerland and in Belgium. So it's expanding, and as it should, because the base is English. Well, hopefully maybe in French next time, but in English. And unless you introduce that global perspective to your company as well as the clients that you deal with, that the clients you are involved with, there's no need to study English. There's no reason why you need to put that extra effort into learning English. School should be enough. So, as I always said with my sisters and my parents, Academy, of course, is teaching English, but it's also actually teaching a lifestyle. It's also introducing cultural literacy in that sense. It's broadening their horizons. It's increasing their chances of experiencing the world for the companies that my clients are involved with as well. And without that, there's no reason why we should be teaching English to begin with. So yes, the global perspective, the globe, the world is extremely important for us as a survival and as well as our mission statement as well.
So obviously, being in the field of education, COVID has had an impact on your business. I know that you've had to adapt the way you convey content to your students and do more Zooms, like all of us, I guess. On the impact of COVID specifically, apart from adapting to the crisis, you went a bit further because you're involved in COVID research with your husband on the topic of gender role, in particular women's role. Can you talk a bit about that? And also what led you to doing this work?
Yes. Well, the French husband that I have is a professor at a national university in Japan. And of course, our study is focused on Japan. So I'm not quite sure how generalizable it could be, but my husband was very kind to involve me in his research grant that was given to professors at that university. We had submitted a proposal, and thank goodness it was accepted. It was about how teleworking affected family conflicts, gender roles, and gender identity during the COVID shutdown, the lockdown in Tokyo. We surveyed through a questionnaire. I was focused with gender identity and new male roles in Japan. Japan, of course, is an extremely progressive country, but it's still extremely conservative as well. And I might have mentioned that the younger generation are, gung-ho, men feel that women are equals. There's really not a lot of differences between gender and what they can achieve. So, but I think there's a generation gap around maybe people in their 50s or above, where the concept of gender is still very conservative. I think we saw that with the Me Too movement. Japan never took off with the Me Too movement. I'm pretty sure there are many things that are happening, but it never materialized, which I found very interesting. And this is why I chose this topic. Basically, with women, with the younger generation, seeing that gender is equal. The obligations to companies and the obligations to work are as equal as men and women. But I wanted to make sure is that true even in the household? And this is where the study comes from. I wanted to know if teleworking with both men and women, with children, young children, how it affected the role they play within the household. Because still, in any society, women tend to take more responsibilities at work than men. A generation ago, there was the concept of the second shift for women. The first shift of being working in a company, and the second would be taking care of the household as soon as when they come back home. So I wanted to see what the reality was during COVID, which was interesting, actually. There was significant difference in how men and women, this is the younger generation, not the older generation, with children, men thought or believed that their responsibility in the household increased, became more important. Or the female or the wife didn't have to take care as much, and they wanted to be more involved. Which there was a list of chores, household chores that they could choose from, actually. And ironically, it was not cooking or cleaning; it was laundry, which is something that my husband and I are going to look into why it's laundry. But men felt that they should be responsible for laundry duties. and they were more involved in playing with their children. However, women did not see that. They thought that men shouldn't be involved in households. There was still that bias, female bias, where your home is your temple. That women should be in charge of household duties. So, in a way, things are changing, but they're not changing as fast as I thought. Men are more conscious of equality and equality between gender, but there's still that hard wall that Japanese females who work full-time believe that the household should be taken care of by women. And that's an interesting thing. I'm just wondering how it would have changed during the second wave. Well, actually, it's the third wave we're experiencing in Tokyo, how that would be changing after everybody is so frustrated about the constraints that have been placed on us through COVID. And if females found that maybe having their husbands, more involved in household chores, improve their life and well as their satisfaction at home, it would be a good follow-up questionnaire to do to see how it has evolved. Because now with COVID, we're in year one. We've been in this situation for a year now. So a lot can change. And I think there could be a lot of research done about how women view their place in society. I think, government could advocate more about gender equality at work, but I think women need to be comfortable with that initiative as well. And as a conservative country as Japan, it's taking a little bit longer, it seems like, for women to come to terms with letting go and having men cook or having men clean. They seem to be fine with doing the laundry, but they need to be more, I don't know, give males a chance, give men a chance, give husbands a chance to be more involved in the household chores. In my case, my mother was a housewife until she gave birth to all her 3 children. So I saw my mother as a person who cooked. My father was always away on a business trip. So it was my mother that always took care of the household. I never questioned that. Maybe this is why when my father was transferred to Atlanta, I became that CEO's wife, pseudo CEO's wife, because my father needed to be taken care of and the household needed to be taken care of as well. However, my children see me working. I'm just wondering if that difference, that you are responsible for something outside of work, transfers onto your children, and that in itself will change their concept of gender differences and gender responsibilities in the household. Because my husband, his mother worked very hard, actually. I don't know how she did it. She's extremely well organized. She was quite successful in her work. And my husband saw that. He saw that mothers worked. Maybe it's more common in Europe as well. So my husband saw that the household doesn't have to be completely taken care of by the mother or the woman. So today I'm extremely lucky, and it's because of my husband that I'm able to pursue what I pursue my education, work from the family business, because my husband is so involved in housework. He loves, again, doing the laundry. I'm not quite sure what that's all about, but he loves doing the laundry. He's actually taking care of our children and the household right now as we speak, because I'm on a business trip here. There's no bias for my husband. If there needs to be something done, he will do it. There's no bias at all, and I'm extremely grateful for that. And I'm extremely grateful to his mother, who showed my husband that the role of women is as important outside of the house as it is inside the house. So I think perspectives on gender can change in a generation. And I think it's the responsibility of women that we do transfer that value to our children. I think it has to start generation to generation. And maybe something like a COVID lockdown to make women realize in Japan that it's okay to not have to take care of the house all the time, or it's okay that we don't have to take care of our children all the time. We are married to a partner who is capable of doing that and is actually ready to take care of that. I think men are really, really interested in becoming more involved in household chores. And the questionnaire and the survey proves that men are ready. They want to take care of kids. They want to take care of the house. They would love to cook. And they're enjoying doing their laundry.
What's that about?
I know. My laundry. I think it's because it's mechanic. I don't know. There's a little bit of an advocacy going on because in Japan, which I realized after the survey results, looking at the survey results, but a lot of the commercials for laundry detergent in Japan is done by men.
Really?
Yes. I hadn't realized that, but it's been going on for quite a while, apparently. In Japan, there's a movement called ikumen. Iku means to bring up. Men is men, female and men. So it means that men are involved in bringing up their children and household and being more involved in household. And it's considered a very idealized, beautiful, handsome man, the ikumen man. And they have commercials where men are putting laundry detergent into washing machines, and they're so happy everything came out white and beautiful out of the washing machine. So I'm not quite sure what's going on, but there's something about laundry that are motivating men to be participating in household chores.
All across the world, we see that women are now building alliances, networks, and understanding that there is a power in numbers, in sharing our stories. There are now women-dedicated professional spaces to allow us to sort of grow and progress and also to support each other. Do you see these trends in Japan, and how do you feel about them?
Well, as I had mentioned, Watanabe Academy is a strong advocate for equality for women. We're not as big, a large organization to create a network per se, but we do want to be a space, a place that supports women. And I know that this is just the beginning. My involvement at Harvard has just opened up my mind because there's a great network of professional women, lawyers, doctors, politicians, researchers, professors, that have created their own network of advocacy for women. And it's something that I aspire to very much, that I would love to do, and which is lacking in Japan, I think. I think one of the evidence there is through the survey as well, that women still believe that the place of women, although in conjunction with being productive in society now, but that the place of women is still inside the house. There's also a little bit of a fantasy in the sense that a good wife has that apron on and taking care of their children and, greeting their husband once they get home. There's still that fantasy of an ideal wife. It's still very strong in Japan. And it takes great courage for a woman to say, okay, I'm more than that. I can do more than that. With my education and my knowledge and my ambition, I should be able to do that. And I think it's in its infancy right now. And my ambition, my wish is to create a safe environment for women to be able to express that and to continue that on a global basis as well. I think in Japan, maybe I'm not wrong, but Japan is still considered very conservative, and women have not progressed into managerial positions or board of directors. We see very, very few female politicians, very few CEOs in major companies. I mean, it's a completely different color than abroad, or especially in Europe. So I think with what we're doing at Academy, Watanabe Academy, with the new connections and real realizations that I've touched, will help encourage or help support women to realize their full potential in that sense. I think that becoming a mother and staying at the house is a great accomplishment as well, because women are responsible, in a way responsible, and we have that nurturing, I don't know if it's a habit or not, but a nurturing, we're designed to nurture. So I think being at home is wonderful. But there are other women who would like to do something else as well. And I think right now Japan needs to create a support system that helps them. Women are as educated as men now. They are as ambitious outside of the household as men are, or even more, because we do need to express ourselves more strongly to have society listen to us. But there are very, very amazing women that could better our society for sure. And I am in support of this, and I believe it's part of my life work to do this. Hopefully I'm becoming a good example. Hopefully.
You know, I want to end on this. You told me that change is often influenced by the outside world in Japan, and that you see that Japan is on the precipice of change when it comes to women being able to realize their full potential. As you say, if a woman wants to be at home and fully dedicate herself to her family, then that's great. But we should also support individual choices and those women who want to thrive in the professional world. Can you talk about that element of Japan being on the precipice of change? Because for anyone who's been to Japan or is interested in Japanese culture, it is a very complex society. I mean, I've been twice, and I find it very complex.
It really is. I have a friend that is in a quite high position at a Japanese pharmaceutical company, but in the United States. And she had to travel Japan before COVID, of course. And she was the only woman on the board of directors or any kind of meeting room. And she was the oddity of it all. And Japan, yes, it's especially the current generation of older generation who are in managerial positions, they come from a different era. I mean, fundamentally, I'm pretty sure that their parents or their mother was a stay-at-home mom, which is a great thing because it contributed heavily to the success of Japan, and the productivity of Japanese men. But you only know you only know through your own experience. And the men who are currently in position experienced their life and their mother through not as their mother working, but as a person who takes care of the house. I think that with more global influences, and of course, you have to remember that Japan was an isolated country for a very long time until we opened up our borders after after centuries. And that influence really revolutionized the current contemporary Japanese culture. And since then, Japan tends to follow its own footsteps. Sometimes we call it the Galapagos syndrome because we are an island country. We go by our own instinct and follow our own instinct. But at some point, the outside world kind of tells us, that's not correct, or you should do it a little bit more. And actually, we believe in that. And for Japan to survive, in order for Japan to progress and to be a contributing society on a global scale, we treasure the opinions and criticisms, and sometimes, but of outside influences, because I think fundamentally Japanese people are extremely diligent and want to do good. One of the influences that is currently happening is putting women in leadership positions. It was a governmental initiative, for example, as well as the ikumen, where the government tries to promote more equality in the household or equality in profession. And this influence comes from abroad because Japan has been criticized where women are not quite visible in leadership positions in corporations and in government as well. So I think that having that criticism really jumpstarts our initiatives to equality in Japan with enough pressure, as well as with enough inspiration, because Japan is also always looking outside as a country as well, especially these days, because we are interdependent. It's a global economy. So we look for examples. And actually, France is quite a big inspiration in Japanese society. Even for the tax code that was just revised in Japan, we look to the tax code in France. It's a great inspiration for us. And to see, okay, in France or in Europe or even in Northern European countries, women actually are in the boardroom. When men see that, regardless of their upbringing, it opens up more possibilities and more possibilities for society to change in Japan. So it's an odd thing to be criticized for something and being able to change it, but I think Japan thrives on criticism and opinion. And more opinions and more criticisms we get, the better for our society, I think. And especially about gender equality.
That's great. Even though many of us feel that France also still has a long way to go, but I guess we see things going in the right direction all over, right? And that's what we should all celebrate.
Yeah. People don't like change, and especially when you've been on an isolated island for so long. Well, I don't know how England does it, but Great Britain does it. But in Japan, we consider ourselves on a long-lost island, innovating on our own and doing what we do without the consequences of outside borders. And
you don't think we do the same here?
I don't know. You tell me.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
That makes me happier then. But, when I watched the inauguration of a few days ago and see a woman vice president in the United States, that's inspirational. To see women and visible, this in itself will inspire. And we still need to be inspired, I think. We still need to see with our eyes and be inspired. About it, even at Harvard, there weren't female students for a very long time. It's only recently that to be graduating from Harvard, you are graduating from Harvard. Until recently, you were graduating from the female university next door. You didn't have a Harvard diploma. It's only recently. So, by example, I think.
Yeah, I so agree with what you just said. Just like you, I was so inspired when I saw Kamala Harris at the inauguration. And as you say, it sends a message to all the young girls out there, and even to us as grown women, right? That with work and ambition, you can get where you want. So, that's really amazing. Anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I just wanted to say thank you to you for doing this for women. You are creating a network. You are creating hotspots, in a way, of ambitious women. You're putting ambitious women into this network through your podcasts and your future endeavors. And I just wanted to say thank you, really. I hope my words are very small. I've been talking, but my words are still small and it needs to still be conveyed. But you found this platform to bring women together and to be inspired by their stories and to bring power to them, because to make change takes a lot of power. It takes a lot of willpower. It takes a community of power. And I'm just extremely grateful that you have found this platform for women. And I just wish you so much good luck and so much goodwill, and for you to continue to look for the voices of women who will inspire the next generation of women and current generation as well.
Thank you so much. One, I'm really touched. And two, you know that I always wanted to have you on. So I'm so happy that we managed to make it happen. You were so generous with your time and you were such an open book. Thank you so much. Thank you very much to Kaoruko Magnier-Watanabe for being so open and transparent about her life and professional journey. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app and subscribe to be notified of new episodes. While you're there, please leave us a 5-star rating and a review to support us. You can follow us on social media at Entre-Elles Podcast. Thank you for listening, and see you in 2 weeks for a new episode in French and in a month for a new episode in English.